I love this theme. How do we best grow, develop, prepare ourselves for the future? I want to start answering this question by first taking a look at the past. My past. Younger Laurie had a lot of passion, drive, ambition, creativity. Here's me and my brother building a 2-story go-kart. You may not have seen one of these before, and there's a good reason for it. It didn't last the first turn, but I learned a lot about physics that day. And I was told by a lot of adults and teachers when I was younger that I would do a lot of great things someday. Once I had a college degree and some experience, someday. I wasn't sure about that word, but I listened to them, and I went on to get my fancy degree and went out into the world to get some experience. But I felt like I had to relearn to think when I got out to the real world. Education had taught me that there's one right answer to a question that would be given to me in life, when that's not the way the real world worked. You had to have resourcefulness, adaptability, innovation, resiliency. And so a few years ago, I decided that I wanted to teach high school students those skills, those entrepreneurial mindset and skills, through starting real companies. I founded MIT Launch, and the flagship program for this is an entrepreneurial summer program where high school students start real companies. And we found that there's a process requiring students to be inspired and learn, and then go through to action and experience. And at MIT, we refer to a process and components called 4-H, not to be confused with the kind of food and agriculture club. I'm not sure if you'll have that here. So 4-H, it starts with heart, having passion, ambition, mindset. And then the learning component, having the knowledge and that foundational concepts. The community, the home, the people around you that are able to help support you through this process, and then the hands, the action. And these latter components, the action and experience, is really where the majority of the actual growth happens. And so true to our teaching, we perform market research to really understand who it is that takes entrepreneurship education classes, who's interested in this. And we found that there's 2 main customer personas. There's what we call the ready-to-go entrepreneur, the ones that have a little bit of experience. And this is Kevin Lee. He came to MIT Launch this past summer, had developed apps before, and says his interest is 100% in the startup world. There's not a lot of students that are already in this camp that are the ready-to-go entrepreneur. But on the other hand, there's also what we call the exploratory, curious entrepreneur. And there's a lot of students that are in this camp. 90% of high school students say they're interested in entrepreneurship, but only 75% say they know where to start. So what's stopping them? I found this to be a very curious question, so it led me to ask the applicants of the 2015 program to launch, what are the biggest hurdles to starting a company? Open-ended question. I tried to distill that down to one or two words, and here's what those students had to say. So 80% of the respondents were in the first 7 categories here, going from experience to credibility down through time. And interestingly, this chart remains pretty similar across those 2 different personas. So let's go through some of these top ones to first say why high school students can start companies, and then I'll cover why they should. Ready for our crash course in entrepreneurship? All right. So first, experience and credibility. High school students may not have a resume to point to yet for credibility, but you have something even more powerful. You've been raised with the latest technological advances, have the aptitude to learn things amazingly quickly, and less responsibility, and therefore can take on more risk. And what's more, you have just enough experience to be able to be dangerous and have what I call this ability to be able to forego what adults have, which is adults have what I call this I should have known better effect. They have almost too much experience. And so they're afraid of what people might think if they don't do it the status quo way. So you have this amazing propensity to innovate and think about the way things could be instead of how they should be. Plus, succeed or fail, it's a badge of honor to have even attempted a startup at your age. Next, knowledge of the process. Knowing where to begin and how to navigate the process can be daunting, but there's so many amazing tools out there. And in fact, MIT has integrated a lot of these into a comprehensive and proven framework for launching a company, the disciplined entrepreneurship methodology. It walks you through the 24 steps of starting a company. And if 24 steps seems daunting, it can also be distilled down into 6 themes, starting with who is your customer, what can you do for them, how do you reach them, how do you make money, how do you build that, and how do you grow and scale. Next, funding. A lot of people think that as soon as they have an idea, they have to go out and raise money for it. This is a much later stage. If you try to raise money too early, you're actually going to have to give up a lot of equity because there's going to be way too much risk. So you want to prove demand on your own first. And then once you do go to raise money, you want to understand the different types of potential investors involved. Friends and family, angel investor, venture capital. A lot of people think that venture capital is the first one you go to. That's going to be a later one. And don't let this later stage stop you from starting the journey. It's a later one. Innovation idea. A lot of aspiring entrepreneurs think they have to have this perfect, innovative idea that nobody's ever thought of before, customers didn't even know that they needed, and has no competition. All myths. Evidence of competition is actually a good thing. That means that you're solving a problem that customers actually have and are willing to pay for. Your job is just to find your unique differentiator and then execute against that really well. And trying to find something that's at this intersection of things that you're passionate about, where you have some skills to be able to execute on that, and there's a market need for. Next, team. As we mentioned with the process, there are some things that you can do on your own first. The market research and figuring out how to be able to fill that. And then when you do go to find a team, figuring out how to be able to find people with the same vision and complementary skills. There's a lot of amazing forums out there that can help you find that community, whether it's within your own school, online forums of other entrepreneurs. Finally, time. I started launch on the side of being a management consultant, a notoriously time-demanding job. If you find something that you're passionate about, it's worth carving out time for. And it comes down to a couple of simple things. Planning well to find the things that are going to have the most impact, and then when you're working on things, occasionally reminding yourself that perfect is the enemy of done. We use a tool that I call the 80-20 rule. 80-20 rule pervades everything in life. 80% of your revenue is going to come from 20% of your customers. 80% of the value of what you read comes from 20% of the text. And 80% of the value of your work comes from 20% of the effort. So when starting your company, find those 20% of things that you can do that will get you 80% of the results, and forget the rest. Because you'll drive yourself crazy if you're a perfectionist as an entrepreneur. And in life in general. I know that some of the teachers in the room are going to say, oh my God, did she just tell our students to not get a 100% grade on their tests? And you may have noticed that I skipped over mindset with those top 7. No aspiring entrepreneur is going to have the perfect mindset at the outset. But if you just take that initial leap, then you develop a lot of the other components as you go. And we'll see that when I get into the why should you part. So now let's have a look at some of the companies or some of the entrepreneurs that have been developed through this crazy 4-week accelerator that we go through during the summer. So I mentioned Kevin Lee before. So he, with his love of developing apps, joined with a student who had a love of environmental impact and a student who loved algorithmic design, and developed a company called Dropwise, which is a smart water meter, a device that clips onto your water meter and then has an iOS app output that you can regulate how much water you're using. Developed this in 4 weeks during the summer, a prototype, the app, and are now taking that to market and working with manufacturers. And this is just one story. We have students across all different industries, different products, services, apps, entrepreneurs being created, entrepreneurs continuing to go out and share their love of entrepreneurship, a student who's developed hackathons that have impacted over 1,500 students across 6 countries, students that are connecting other entrepreneurs to mentors across the world. And all these examples show that they start with this passion, with the heart, learn the process, build and engage in the community, and then act on the things that they're excited about. So we've covered how you can, even in just 4 weeks. Now, why should you? Well, MIT Launch's mission is to prepare students for real-world success. But success can mean very different things to different people. So we sought to try to figure out what are the key contributors to success. How successful do the students consider themselves to be who have been through this experience? And where did they say they learned these things? So we developed a survey to try to rate these components. And while these are very preliminary, I'm excited to share some of the results of what our students are saying. So the first thing we asked was to rate these different dimensions of importance to future success. So a number of different skills, ranging from adaptability, resourcefulness, quantitative analysis, technical skills, resiliency. And what we found is that some of the things that you might consider the traditional skill building, quantitative analysis and technical skills, were ranked lowest. Whereas resiliency, the ability not just to cope with or manage adversity, but to harness it to your advantage, the big and small things, is most important. Followed by work ethic, your drive. And next, we asked students, well, how on track do you consider yourself to be on these dimensions? And we asked them not just from below average, average, above average, far above average, but we had to add these additional dimensions of top 1% and best student I know. And there were still a lot of students that put themselves in that top category. And what we found is a very high correlation between these two, which is to say that students consider themselves on the path to success. So then finally we asked, where did students learn these components? Whether that might be in school, school classes, school clubs, from starting a company, or other areas. This is a powerful slide. While most of these students worked on their companies in 4 weeks, many of them continuing it afterwards, the biggest contributor to these areas of future success was starting a company. So what does this mean? As students, as educators, as parents, as other members of the community, becoming an entrepreneur, going through this process, working within a community and acting, build skills for the real world. So numbers can't capture everything. I love the additional flavor that a lot of students put into things that they say, whether it be having the confidence to take on anything, the growth that they have not just as an entrepreneur, but as a person, and how life-changing this type of experience can be. And there's still a lot to do with this survey. I think there's potential to be able to roll it out to validate the questions further, to build this success definition, and would love any feedback from any of those of you in the room. We've covered why you can start companies. Start with heart, learn the components, get to real action, prepare you for skills for the real world. Ultimately, we believe that you can be an entrepreneur not just someday, but today. Because what's next? Whether you become an entrepreneur in the future or not, it's one of the best things that you can do to prepare for the future while exploring the things that you love today. Thank you.